Good morning. Y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, here we are again, saying thank you, asking you to forgive us, asking you to be with us, lead us and guide us. Help us do things that please you. Forgive us when we don't. Let us have a good day because we know you're in charge. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Just for everybody's information, this morning's meeting is mostly information. There will not be a calendar set for Thursday. Okay? We have other opportunities where we can Mr. Knight? What? Keep hand off that button. But we'll have other opportunities over the next 2 days to set agendas. And what we're going to do is let those folks on the wall say their piece. You can ask questions if you want to. If there's changes that y'all have, bring those up so that we'll kind of have a note what we're doing. Mr. Ginn.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Good to be with you all today. Said in the interest of time, I didn't bring any chocolate cake or ice cream.
I didn't get any of the ice cream. Somebody took it all.
I'll see if we can get that fixed. Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully request Senate Bill 379 in a House version, passed unanimously in the House, passed unanimously in the Senate. It was a bill that was geared to taking sales tax off of firefighters in those areas where we have elected boards that serve and they depend on ad valorem tax. Now, the Ways and Means Chairman, Jay Powell, has improved the bill by adding a few other things, said to it. It's a good vehicle for helping with the assessment of property, said to where they can actually use information on their rate of rental. I think it improves some things for some of our charitable 501c3 organizations like Goodwill to do some training and help with them. I also believe it helps with some conservation use value assessment. Said that my colleague Chairman England wanted to see pass forward. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll respectfully ask that at the appropriate time you work to push forward on Senate Bill 379.
Okay, here's the question back. That bill now has HB 924, HB 982, and HB 987 in it as it stands right this second, correct?
I believe those are the correct numbers, sir.
And later on there'll probably be an amendment. Do like the little dog in the back, do like this. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to request Senate Bill 258 under modified structure midway down the front page. Senate Bill 258, it was authored by Senator Miller and was a three-year lock on property taxes if they're repealed. We've also added House Bill 990 from Chairman Powell, House Bill 862 from Chairman Knight, and was fortunate to be able to add House Bill 919, which was a bill that I authored in the House, the Rural Health Care Reform Act. The only change that passed the House was that we added some additional metrics that were presented to us as an opportunity to improve the bill.
Give me those House bills again.
House Bill 990.
Yep.
House Bill 862, and House Bill 919.
919. Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under modified structural rules, Senate Bill 199, we modified the definition of campaign material to help the poll workers. That's simply the bill.
Hang with me. Okay. Wait a second, we do have a question. Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask the Senator, what does it change about campaign materials?
It talks about what you can wear. It clarifies the distances from the poll places where you can put signs and that. It was a situation that arose a couple of years ago where somebody had something on and a poll worker said that was related to a party and told them they had to take it off before they could vote. So this just kind of helps the definition of materials.
So it's so you can wear things on your person. What does it do with signs and setback distances? And
all that stays the same.
Thanks, sir.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gooch.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senate Resolution 863 on the back. This is your annual road naming bill that the House and the Senate do every year. House Transportation Committee adds their bills to our bill and vice versa. This bill has not only the one you see written there, but it has about 25 other road namings on it. 15 or 16 are House bills as well. So we need to try to get these both past the House and the Senate, and I'd ask for your consideration for that for Thursday, sir.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first bill is Senate Bill 258, which Representative Duncan carried. It's my pleasure to be the omnibus bill for the House for Chairman Powell, Chairman Knight, and Representative Duncan. So I'm not going to go through that one. The second was modified structure, page 2, SB 378. It's a compromise bill. When it came out of the House, we eliminated changes at the commission districts in DeKalb. But what it does, it eliminates the CEO position. It has a professional county manager and a chairman. It makes us in line with all the other counties from that perspective. And I appreciate the governor saying it's time to get rid of the CEO position at DeKalb. Obviously, it hasn't worked out very well.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Chairman Miller, does this bill apply to any county other than DeKalb County?
No, ma'am.
Did this bill go through as local legislation or as general legislation?
It went through as general legislation.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones.
Yes, I had a question for the Senator. When we have done the cityhood bills, do
Yes.
they go through as local legislation or as general legislation?
They've gone through as general legislation. And I do. I spoke with Minority Leader Abrams, and I appreciate her position. And philosophically, if we lived in a perfect world, I would probably agree with her. But I don't live in a perfect world. I live in DeKalb.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
No more questions. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I respectfully request Senate Bill 319. It's the fifth from the bottom on page 1. Senate Bill 319 is a simple bill. It passed the Senate. It was refined in the House. It allows licensed professional counselors to be able to continue to practice their craft. It puts them on the same standards. It helps them with the same standards as social workers. Thank you.
What? Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Chairman, we do have an amendment for that.
Is it on the desk?
It's on the desks.
Let's take it while we got it. All right, you got on your desk, you got AM 33-1644. You can read the amendment. Then I will defer to Mr. Dixon if that fixes this bill, like everybody can walk out the same door at the same time.
Yes, sir. I've seen the amendment.
Okay. All right. With
Yes, sir.
with that said, I'm going to assume that Mr. Dixon moves on the amendment. Got a second? Is there anybody opposed to the amendment? All right. It's out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you two bills. The first is Senate Bill 333, which is on page 1, modified open rule 3 down. Mr. Chairman, this deals with nonprofit corporations and changing our current code so that it would be easier for nonprofit corporations that are domiciled outside of Georgia to move into Georgia. The second bill is Senate Bill 332, which is on the bottom of page 1, modified structured rule, and that simply provides for a photo ID for judges in this state. They currently don't have one, and this would enable judges ingress and egress from facilities more easily. And on the back side of the ID, it provides what their particular rights are with regard to carry.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tippins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two bills under modified structure on the back page. First is second down, Senate Bill 348. This allows for local school districts through their contracts to have college and career academies. Then the fifth one down from the top, Senate Bill 374. This is a one-year pilot program to combine state, local, and federal funding to more effectively address the challenges in Title I schools.
Mr. Tippins, are those your bills?
Yes, sir. They're my bills, but they had a great deal of interest from LG's office.
Oh, the Lieutenant Governor?
Yes, sir.
Oh. And my bill's next to last on y'all's blue sheet.
Well, I plan on voting for it. I think your bill's a great bill.
Just wanted to let you know about my bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No questions. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have a Senate resolution and a Senate bill. The Senate bill is not on the blue sheet today, but Senate Resolution 892 is to dedicate the portion of I-75 in Houston County, the Governor Sonny Perdue Highway. We asked for a typo correction on Dooley County. It's not got an E in it. And I don't know if there have been any other changes to it, Mr. Chairman. Have there been? SR 892.
Bear with me a minute. Your other bill is that 337?
Yes, sir.
Has that thing been fixed?
It appears to me it has. I've got a LC number. Would that help?
Yeah, give me the LC. Is the bill back like you originally had it, and it doesn't have?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that, and I appreciate Chairman Cooper helping me with that too.
Okay, give me that LC number.
LC 336630 ERS.
Okay, that was reported this morning. So, any questions, Mr. Walker? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. There's two bills that I'm here today on behalf of. One is top of the page, Senate Bill 58. We've discussed before the Georgia Leadership and Service Admission Act. And then the other bill that's newly available, which I appreciate, is Senate Bill 345. And the bill seeks to create a level playing field from which courts will decide future property disputes between congregants and their affiliated denominations. It codifies guidance from the U.S. Supreme Court that state courts should decide property disputes between local congregations and denominations from a neutral position. And that's laid out in the bill, the four areas that the neutral principles should be determined by, and not just the ecclesiastical denominational determination.
So my Baptists don't have to worry about splitting up assets since they own all their assets outright.
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman.
And this goes to the problem of sometimes the asset was donated to the local, but then the main affiliation group thinks they own that property since it was donated locally.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. It just clarifies what Georgia has always said that they intend to do, which is to use the neutral principles test in determining ownership of church property as opposed to the deference test.
So our bill just basically reiterates the judges to use existing law?
Well, it reiterates to the courts to use the neutral principles test, which was a standard from a Supreme Court case. We're codifying a Supreme Court case law.
Are we urging those judges or telling those judges?
Well, in the bill that y'all will have available to you, you would be urging them to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought we passed the gun bill.
We did, sir.
I thought the Senate passed it.
Most happily they did, sir.
Oh.
I'm here at the request of Chairman Powell.
Oh, I thought maybe you was bringing the governor's bill. Mr. Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm here on behalf of Chairman Powell in Senate Bill 270. Just kind of, we're going to make an amendment to it. Chairman Powell with me wanted me to just take a second and go over 270. This is amended in our Public Safety Committee. What we did, we added Representative Rathsberger's swatting language to it, and you see that on the first section. And then we took parts of my House Bill 1060 in abundance of caution and added it to this bill also. And that being just the different parts that we added in 1060. I'll be glad to go over them if you think I need to, Mr. Chairman. But that's essentially what the bill does. I know Chairman Powell has an amendment he'd like to make.
Mr. Powell, tell us about amendment AM 410207.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for favorable consideration. Yesterday in the Senate rules, the distinguished rules chairman over there said they had so many bills they couldn't get on, so he said, all you folks in the House, there's plenty of vehicles. Well, this is a vehicle. In this amendment, it does three things. All of these are bills that have been previously passed by the legislature. The first section in there deals with the Department of Corrections. Currently, the Commissioner of Corrections is the only person authorized to sign an arrest warrant on an escapee, and what they're asking for is to let him authorize his deputy or assistant commissioner to also sign escape warrants. Section 8 deals with the pardon and paroles. Last year, when we passed the governor's bill on criminal justice reform that transferred to agencies, there's still some parole board employees that are post-certified, and they were left out of being able to, if they were disabled or retired, to be able to take their weapons and badges with them. This brings them into the mix. It was left out last year. And then last but not least, the bill that passed earlier in the session on the Interstate Compact Commission. And that's when inmates wish to be transferred out of the state to some other state to their jurisdiction. The application fee is $25 currently, and the administration would like to move that to a $100 application fee. And that's what the amendment does. It's just sort of passes bills we've already passed.
You've heard Mr. Powell's amendment. Is that a motion, Mr. Powell?
That is a motion. Thank you.
Got a motion and a second. Anybody opposed to that amendment? Okay, it passes. Mr. Jaspers, anything else you need to talk about?
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman and Rules Committee, for all the hard work you've done this year. We appreciate you.
See? Somebody noticed. Okay. Nothing else on there. Mr. Peake.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask for SB 145. It is Easter week, and we found a bill that is gotten new life. This is the medical cannabis expansion bill that is replacing the language that was in SB 145. Is the exact same bill that passed the House overwhelmingly, with some slight correction in the low THC oil language at the request of GBI and district attorneys. Doesn't change the material nature of the bill.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for Senate Bill 379. That was Senator Ginn's bill that's had several other bills attached to it.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the appropriate time, I'd like to offer an amendment to a bill that's going to be on the floor today.
Time's right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to direct members of the committee to AM 390168. This is a cleanup amendment to a floor amendment made in the Senate. There was some discussion in committee, and this is what came out of our as a result of discussion in the Transportation Committee. This simplifies and clarifies. The Senate wanted to ensure that the Beltline was not affected by this bill, and they wanted to ensure that the streetcar in Atlanta is not affected by this bill. This amendment maintains that. It more cleanly defines it and cleans up some pretty messy language from the Senate floor amendment. Accomplish the exact same thing.
Anybody got questions on the amendment? I take that as a motion. Mr. Sessler, a second. Any opposed? It's on. Okay. On your desk, you've got amendment AM 410200. Mr. Powell.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to SB 320. This was the last little piece of cleanup from last year's tax cab Uber bill. And this says that any jurisdiction that still uses medallions, which there's only 2 in the state, that the department that they will require proof of insurance, and basically have a sticker on the windshield saying that that vehicle has proper insurance.
Wait just a second. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, on that amendment you just offered, is this in any way going to require Uber to do something they're not doing right now?
No, sir. It has nothing to do with Uber.
Only taxis?
Only the taxis.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, there's no more questions. AM 410200, Mr. Powell, do you move?
Yes, sir.
Move in a second. Any opposed? All right, it's on. Everybody got another amendment on their desk? LC is not so much an amendment as it looks like a substitute. Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The substitute that you have, LC 440186, this comes at the request of Representative Clark. This has to do with the welfare fraud bill that he previously passed out of the House, which I think has been attached to the Senate bill you have in front of you. To my knowledge, there was one amendment that needed to be included. It was a technical amendment that was brought to Representative Clark by DFACS and by DHS, and it was purely technical, but if we did not do the amendment, and I'm looking for the exact line number, and it doesn't match up with the language that I have, but it's essentially a three-word amendment that had to do with the authority to prosecute fraud under the statute, and that the bill, as it passed out of the House, unintentionally was limiting in terms of what could be prosecuted. And the amendment that is brought to me, and it's the words "under any authority" are the operative three words, really, will allow the proper authorities to prosecute with the breadth that the legislature has intended. That's the nature of the amendment that I'm aware of that goes to the substitute.
Look over on page 10 and see if that's where we are. Section 2, under A and then 2 on line 313 or 314. Is that it?
Yeah, I think by virtue of the reference to pursuant to Article 1 of Chapter 4 of Title 49, I think that's what gives it the breadth that it needs for the ability to prosecute where necessary, whereas the words that had been there before would have been more limiting, as I understand it. And Representative Clark has asked us to allow this to go to the floor in order for the House to consider that. But again, that was a technical, what I can speak to is the technical amendment that was brought to Representative Clark and therefore to me here on the Rules Committee by DHS and by DFACS. That's what I can speak to.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill I mentioned to you earlier. Senator Hill has asked for another change, but more than that, the department testified incorrectly on one aspect of this, and I'll have an amendment coming to it, sir. And that's a pretty bad aspect of it if we leave it in there. So I would appreciate if we just hold it till I can get that amendment done.
All right, that's on the floor today, so we'll have to get it off the floor back to us and then have agreement between Ms. Cooper, Mr. Golick, and Mr. Strickland. No, Mr. Clark. That we all on the same page. Okay? So I'm not going to move on that substitute yet. Okay, anybody else got anything? I will see you later today.